a professor's asked me to compete.
Okay.
But I'm worried about my performance.
Okay.
I don't want to let anyone down, and I don't want to get hurt. So, what's your advice there?
These are two different things. I hesitate to ask people to compete. Have you ever heard me ask anyone to compete? I refer to that as shield beating, right? Who's competing? You competing? Are you going to compete? And then it puts these people in a situation where a lot of students respect their coach and they respect their teacher and they strive to make their instructor proud in their jiu-jitsu journey. And when I ask you to do that, you may feel compelled to please me when in fact you're not emotionally at a place where you feel comfortable competing and you're doing something that makes you feel uncomfortable. I'm torn on this because as an instructor, I understand that there is zero growth without pain. I have to bring you discomfort to make you grow, but I'm also asking you to do something that could potentially hurt you. And that there's a liability on that when that student gets hurt, or if they get hurt, that they're going to look for a place to place that blame. And that's not my fault, right? Like, that's the nature of jiu-jitsu. I would hope that people understand that it has an inherent danger to it as any sport. So I hesitate to shield beat, number one. But this question has some depth to it because the beginning part of the question was about disappointing the teacher with their performance. People get caught in jiu-jitsu all the time. They freeze all the time. Like in combat with soldiers, I saw people freeze. Never mind competing in jiu-jitsu. Like, every person is different. How they deal with that pressure is unique to each person. Sometimes an instructor wants to see that. Sometimes I want to see how you deal under pressure. If you ever need to use jiu-jitsu outside of here, I promise there's going to be pressure. There's going to be anxiety. There are going to be a lot of emotions going around. And sometimes how you react in competition will let an instructor know what they need to do to help you and what we need to focus on. Sometimes a student's problem in their performance is not based around technique or athleticism. Sometimes it's an emotional or an intellectual problem, and those are approached totally differently. So if you're worried about that, we'll talk to your coach. Say, hey, you've asked me to compete. I want to compete, but I'm worried that I'm going to disappoint you. How do I deal with this? And when it's on the instructor's radar and it's come out of your mouth, it will be a different experience when the instructor is there and sees it. Maybe you do freeze, maybe you get submitted, but that's why the referee is there as an advocate for your health. We talked about that in an earlier one. And so that referee can step in and stop it, and hopefully you don't get hurt. Hopefully you don't get hurt. Hopefully your instructor has provided you with the skills necessary to defend yourself, to be competitive in that division. And if they're asking you to compete, I hope that's the case. Now, if you freeze, that's not anyone's fault. That's not your fault. That's not the instructor's fault. That's something that we need to work around. And every time you compete, that will get easier and easier. I can tell you that all of the times that I've competed, I'm stressed until the moment they're like, fight. And then I'm like, not stressed anymore. I'm like, it's time to it's time to choke someone. Kick someone or choke someone. I've competed in both of those venues, but that's not where I was going with that, right? But the moment where they say go, it's go time for me, and we don't know how you're going to react in that moment until you've been in that moment. So that moment can have value, but as an instructor, I also understand that not everyone is emotionally mature enough to own the loss or own the experience on themselves and want to displace that. And then if they get injured as an instructor, I do take ownership for part of that. I feel bad. The second part of that was that you don't want to get injured. That is a real possibility in competing, but life is inherently dangerous on its own. You might get in a car accident on the way to school, you might crash in a plane, you might choke on a hot dog, like there are a lot of things that could kill you, but I would hope that you don't radically change the way you live your life because of the fear of what might happen. If you are not ready to compete, there is no one that can force you to compete. Not your instructor, not your teammates. There's one person that decides if you're going to compete, and that's you. That's ultimately your choice, and the responsibility is solely yours. With that being said, if you sign up and you go to the competition because that was your sole decision and you signed the waiver, that's what you did, Whether you win, whether you lose, whether you get hurt or you don't, that is on you. Now, if your instructor taught you wrong or something like that, that's a different conversation. But all of this is assuming that you have a good coach that is interested in making you better and has taught you good jiu-jitsu.